What is up? I want to take a couple of minutes to go through and give you a quick rapid fire version of common mistakes that I see with web design. Hopefully this will help with web design that you are working on, give you a little bit of additional context and things to keep an eye out for. Starting off with ADA compliance. If you are selling websites to somebody, you need to make sure that you at least are making an effort with this one. ADA compliance takes a number of things into account. Usability of the website, user experience is a big deal. So buttons should not be so close together or so small that they are a struggle for people to press. And then the other big one for people is contrast issues. You see this a lot with hero sections where they've got these black overlays and then they've got some text and things like that. This is another really painful example of contrast issues. So if I go ahead and grab some colors here, the text is obviously this color, and I go over to this as the text color, and then let's grab, let's grab another color here. How about this one? Okay. So I'm obviously guessing here a little bit on the colors, but let's say this is a flat background color. You can very visibly see the issue here. If I've just made this flat text, it's almost impossible for you to read this text. In order for this to work, you need to increase the contrast ratio. And you can see as I'm sliding this, it's giving you different color values and the contrast ratio is improving. However, you can see these switching to pass. You're going to get different ratings based off of different font weights and then obviously what's in here. So this is a graphic versus text. You need to do your best to get these to acceptable levels. I don't typically put something up, even if someone's brand colors, like if they're mad about their brand colors, you need to explain to them, hey, this is an ADA, Americans with Disability Act. This is an accessibility issue. Like I don't care if your colors are these and these. If you want to have text in a background that is this color, it needs to be black or it needs to be white to maintain contrast appropriately. There's a lot of other things that go into ADA compliance, such as alt text, keyboard friendly navigation. Like there's a lot of different things that are important, but those are the two big ones: is contrast ratio and making sure that buttons are actually clickable and not obstructed. So next up is genuinely just not designing for mobile. Almost every single builder, you should be able to change your site to mobile. If you do that and all of your stuff is jumbled up on top of one another, you no longer have padding where it is supposed to be, your stuff just turns into a giant mess, then that is something that you need to fix. You should design, if you want to design based off of the desktop version, great, but you need to switch to the mobile version of the site. And then in addition to designing around this on the mobile version, even if that means you need to add media queries or create custom rules in the styling to alter the look on mobile, you need to check it on an actual set of mobile phones. Like the way that you design this on a computer does not necessarily translate specifically to a device in every single time consistently. So you need to do a double check on, at least one or two phones after you've published the site, but before you've kind of, dusted your hands of the project. Moving on, visual hierarchy. This is a big one, and this image probably is very helpful to go over a handful of different things here. There's a lot of different ways you can control hierarchy. So size, color, how you lay things out, and spacing will help steer the path that your eye moves through on the page. Headlines should always have dominance because people don't physically read from left to right through every single piece of copy on your entire website. They will scan the website, so your headings should have prominence. They should stand out. You'll also hear things described as an F pattern or a Z pattern. This mirrors the way that people typically will look, and it makes it easier for your website to scan. Do some of your own research on F patterns and Z patterns and study visual hierarchy, because this is massively important. Bigger stuff is going to draw your eyes over smaller stuff. Lighter or brighter colors are going to draw your eyes more than darker colors. The way that you lay things out will steer people through reading them or the process of scanning them, and then spacing will help control how people consume elements on your page. This is incredibly vital. The last thing that you want is to have layouts done in a way that people literally, like, you're working against human psychology because of the way you laid out your content. People physically do not want to read it, or they get the perception of, while reading it, they become tired of how often their eyes have to move across the page back and forth and back and forth. So this is a huge one. Again, calls to action, they need to stand out. They should not be constantly changing colors. This is another common thing. And then in addition to that, just having one giant block of completely uniform text like this is nightmare fuel. This is almost all the same rough size of text. The headings are technically larger. You just can't tell because they all blend in. But content like this, and we'll probably touch on this again in a little bit, is not good. This should have been broken up into multiple sections. It could have been laid out differently inside of this section so that it was more consumable if that was the goal. Fancy fonts, while we're here, this is another good one. Ideally, the fonts that you are using, again, are not making it difficult to consume the content on the page. I see this all the time. People try to do these crazy, wild fonts, fonts that are super thin or crazy decorative. They will almost always cause drop-off on a website. And that's the last thing that you want to do, is have people visiting your website, seeing the page, and then immediately bouncing because they're like, there's no way in hell I want to read this. Ideally, you're going to stick to 1, 2, maybe 3 fonts that will help reinforce your brand. If you need help with figuring out branding and stuff like that, we do have options for branding, and there's people I can connect you with, or we can talk through it yourself. Or you could even use ChatGPT to some extent and get 80% of the way there. Okay, so fancy fonts we touched on. Weak or confusing calls to action. If you look here, this at least you understand. If you click this button, it's going to tell you the availability. I don't know what the availability is of. Whoa, I did not click that, but that's fine. Handmade Scotch eggs. So if I click this button, it should take me somewhere that's going to tell me what the availability is for Scotch eggs. And it does, I think. I don't know what this is, but I think it tells me that. So that makes sense. If I click this, it's going to take me to the story about their Scotch eggs. And what do you know? It does. So this site has good call to action as far as buttons go. I'm trying to see if there's any other buttons to give you an example. Obviously, you guys know these symbols. This one was going to take you to Facebook. Well, it's actually not, because the buttons are not connected, so it's actually going to take you to the same page. Totally different issue. But buttons should be visually loud, but they should also be very clear where they're going. You shouldn't continue to mix and match 100 different calls to action on one page. It should be very clear what the page is designed to do and where it's trying to funnel you to, and then it should make it easy for you to go to that place. Layouts with no spacing or strategy. This right here, this giant wall of text, again, that's no go. This feels a little awkward right here. So this would be a good example of a layout with issues with spacing. Why there is this random giant dead space on this page I have no clue. Same here. There is zero padding underneath of this, just the same way as there is no padding above this. This is another common issue that we see, and you can see here, this is another example. Elements are flat, butted up directly against one another in some of these places. You have an uneven amount of padding around here. It's all the same, and then this one is a totally different set of padding. There's no padding over here. So again, this is a very common issue. This text has a weird background with no padding on it either. So this is a really, really important one. And if you struggle with this, you can almost always look at these sections and something feels uncomfortable. Like if you're looking at this website right now, you most likely feel uncomfortable for a number of reasons. But you don't want things to feel too cramped because it sort of feels almost like cheap. And then you also don't want things to feel too far apart because it sort of feels broken. Like this feels like, oh, this person made a mistake. Something is incorrect here. So each of these topics in itself is a whole. You could go do some research and watch several videos on these to really understand the proper way that you should do layouts and understanding spacing and all of this and how it applies to human psychology and how people consume websites. Okay, next up, color palettes. If you have bad contrast, we talked about this, something is completely unreadable. In the same vein, if we look at something like this color palette is going to give you a feeling based on the brand. So this feeling doesn't really jive as much with the actual website itself. This color palette looks a little bit more, approachable is maybe a good word for it. However, this website in itself is a dumpster fire. So color palettes are important. I don't want to talk too much about color palettes because there's a lot of, again, color science that goes into this. You just need to understand that you need to maintain contrast. And if you're dealing with a website where the colors do have issues with one another, it's okay to push back and have the conversation and explain, hey, your colors that you chose for your logo don't work well together. Are you open to discussing, tweaking, or changing this in some way? Color palettes are important. Again, do some other research on this. Cluttered menus. This is a perfect example of a terrifying, overstuffed navigation. Ideally, you do not have things like this, and if necessary, you can nest items. I have nested items via mega menus and things like that. But if you give too many people too many options and things are vague or confusing or hard to navigate or use, again, people will bounce from your site. So you want to avoid doing stuff like this. At least with this, you can tell what it is that you're clicking on if you can read it because of the contrast issues. If you look at this, you can sort of tell what you're looking at to some extent. But even this is a little bit messy. Barring the font issues on this site, you can pretty easily navigate this based off of what you're looking for. So keep in mind, you want navigation menus to look clean, not be cluttered, and not be full of just mess, basically. The common theme here is we're trying to avoid giving people millions of different options to get lost when they're trying to find very specific information on a website. Back over to this one. We talked about this, but I'm just going to touch on it again. Giant walls of text. This is not good. No one is going to read this. In fact, most of the time you come upon a section like this, if you see it, especially if you are on mobile and all of this is compressed, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, there is no way in hell that I am going to read that, and you are going to skip it. Okay, now let's look at the hero section of the homepage. That's terrifying. You want to make sure that all of your information that is important is above the fold. Now, the fold is basically what you see before you start scrolling. If you're on a desktop, this is, slightly going to change a little bit based on the aspect ratio that you're viewing the website in. However, if you're on a mobile device, you are generally going to know what above the fold, quote unquote, is. And ideally, in this hero section, you should be able to answer the question of, where am I at and what does this do? Like, what now? What do I do next? What's my next step? What is the site? What is the whole purpose of this page? Why am I here? And so if you look at this section that we're looking at right now, there isn't really a call to action whatsoever. A simple button on this page that says, take me to the shop would be an improvement, for example. This is a huge deal, and you can see, looking at data, if I pulled up Microsoft Clarity, which is a tool that I use, it's completely free. You can download Microsoft Clarity and install it on any websites. You can see how people behave on a website. Typically what happens is people will land on the site and then they will scroll to a handful of different important sections to them, and they will fill out a form or they will leave. If your hero section is really bad, you will not see anybody look anywhere else on the page. Everyone will land on the hero section above the fold. They'll see what they need to see, and they'll say, this is not what I want, or this sucks, and then they will leave. Another good example of things that people probably miss on is ignoring sales psychology in general. A lot of times what you'll see is people will put bullet pointed lists inside of a homepage hero section. I don't think I have any examples here of that specifically. Oh, this gets scarier as you scroll down. Yeah, I don't see any on this one. These couple of sites, I don't have an example of this, but sales psychology and how it relates to a website is fairly simple. Trust badges are important, including testimonials is important. Anything that you can use that will help improve or show social proof. So you can see right here, this example, there's a badge. However, even though this is a bright colored thing, your eyes are probably not drawn to this immediately when you land on this page. They're probably drawn to this because this looks absolutely terrifying, and you've got these moving images up here. So motion is another thing that you can use for visual hierarchy to kind of steer where people are looking. However, they do have a trust badge. I just don't personally like how they've used it. And when you are using the bullet pointed features is what a lot of people will try to do. They'll say, hey, this thing does XYZ, it's this, it's that. And they focus on features instead of benefits. Ideally, you want to focus on benefits and frame the page content in a way that it makes the person reading it, it matches up with their inner voice. So you have to realize that the website page, it's not you talking at a customer. Ideally, you're putting yourself in the place of the customer when you're creating the website, and you're helping guide them through the process of making a decision based off of whatever that page is for, right? The page should essentially be a step-by-step process towards a single action, ideally, right? Another one that's kind of overlooked a little bit to some extent is image optimization. I created a desktop application actually for this, but you can accomplish the same exact thing with a number of different processes and tools. Ideally, what you're doing is you're uploading images that are properly sized, meaning both the resolution and the file size are done in a way that it makes them easy and fast for them to load. Some builders will automatically do this for you. You'll see the builder that I use will automatically create, a different file type that will be a smaller, more compressed file type that will load faster. That's another good one that you can use. So if I was to put an image in here, even if it is a PNG or a JPEG, let's just grab this. So even if I was to put this in here and it was a JPEG, it would automatically save it as WebP. So you can also see in this example that I've saved this because I was rushing as a .png .webp for whatever reason. That is not the appropriate way to do that, just FYI, so don't do that. Okay, so image optimizations. You know, you can use images a lot of different ways inside of the visual hierarchy to help influence people and step people through that step-by-step process to the single action we were just talking about. So things like before and after photos, even those little sliders are kind of cool. Those can be interesting. I see videos used a lot as well, and there's a couple of things that videos can be used in a positive and negative way. A lot of times I see videos, especially videos that are up top on a page, if they're unexpected, they can be a trigger for bounces. People will leave the site when they see videos because they came there to read and scan content, not to get a video. I like using them as secondary things to provide additional context if you want to, but the reality is people are most of the time on a website looking to scan content, headings, buttons, and make a decision. So if you are using a video, default to adding captions and doing the video silently. A lot of times loud or sudden sounds are what really makes people bounce. So I would absolutely not have a website page that has sound blasting as soon as you land on it, unless it's done very intentionally and very purposefully, and you're aware of the potential side effects. Inconsistency in branding is another big one. And I don't know if I have a good example of this because they at least stayed on brand for the most part. This is a little bit of a stretch, but a lot of times what I see is you'll have visual elements like this that are very round, and then you'll also have them combined with elements like this that are very geometric and squared off. Let me see if there's a couple other examples on this site. Yeah, so everything on this site is squared off and geometric. All of them. And then you've got these round buttons that stick out like a sore thumb. So keeping fonts, colors, button styles, all that stuff uniform is super, super important. It's something that people may not say they notice, but they get a general feel of the website not being cohesive. So using an actual branding system, again, working with somebody to help develop branding is a huge deal with making sure that you're staying consistent with all of this and then adhering to the brand guidelines. A lot of business owners will spend money on developing brand guidelines and then they will completely ignore them, or their web designer will completely ignore them, which is obviously no bueno. Forms is another one that's interesting. I see a lot of times people do not test their forms and how they look on desktop versus mobile. We talked a little bit about that, but what I want to talk about specifically with forms is asking for way too much information. If you are coming to me and we are best friends and I ask you, what is your address, you don't feel uncomfortable sending me your address because you know and trust me. If you are a person that has just landed on on a website completely cold, asking for someone's address right off the bat is probably not a good plan. You will have people that bounce, leave the website based off of how much information you're asking on your forms. This is a huge one. Business owners often will push back and say, hey, I need all of this information. That doesn't mean you can't ask them for the information again later after you've done something to earn it. But up front, putting 7 or 10 form fill fields on a form fill that's probably not good practice just in general. And it is most definitely impacting the amount of form fills that you are getting. It will lose you sales. So keep that in mind as you're building out your forms and you're understanding and formatting the process that people go through to get you their information for whatever reasons that you need it. Okay, so let's talk about animations. Animations is another one that I see people overuse so much. People, for whatever reason, love cramming as much movement as humanly possible on a website. And maybe it does look neat in some situations, but if you're in a place where the person has bad reception, now all of those animations are stuttering or they're not loading in properly. It just creates a whole other variable of things that could go wrong. And it's a lot like if you sell something, you want to stop talking after you've sold the thing, because the only thing you can do at that point is go down. Like, they've already bought, they liked what you had to say, they were interested, and they purchased your thing. The more you talk after that point, literally the only thing that you can do is make them regret their decision after they've already made it. So don't overuse animation. Just be mindful of, and this could even be an ADA issue, people just being disoriented by the amount of like shit that's flying all over your screens. It's a huge consideration. Writing copy for yourself and not for the user. Again, we talked about this a little bit. I should have put this actually higher up in my notes, but writing copy for yourself and not the user is a huge deal. Don't use crazy jargon. Write at, depending on your content, write at a reading level that is lower than you think you need to write at, based off of the audience that you are dealing with. And make sure that you're not just filling the content with just flowery extra nonsense. Everything should be targeted for the most part. And again, in alignment with driving that person through the process to the ultimate single action that page is designed for. If that's a local service page, it should be taking an audience that is cold, informing them about who you are, helping answer any questions that they may have about your product or service, and then getting them to book, either schedule the appointment or fill out a form so that you can take them through the next steps in the process. Okay, then the last ones here, let's talk about search engine optimization and analytics. So you need to have feedback on everything that you do. You're never going to hit the mark perfectly every single time. And without the ability to gather feedback and understand how people are using the site, it's very easy to miss things. So that's where Microsoft Clarity comes in. You can record how people navigate your site. You can understand where they click, how they click, what they read, what they don't read, and you can modify your sites as needed based on that. You have a bonus point here. If you use similar layouts and sections across all of your websites and all of your pages on your websites, you will continue to gather more and more in-depth data that you can aggregate and pull patterns from. If you see a frequently asked questions section that is at the top of a page versus one at the bottom of a page is getting twice as much engagement, then maybe it makes sense to answer some of those questions at the top of the page versus the bottom. There's a lot of inferences and things that you can take from these analytics, these heat maps and things like that, that you can use to improve the usability and effectiveness of your site for that primary purpose. Lastly, let's talk about search engine optimization. This isn't necessarily a web design mistake, but it is something that I see all the time. Is web designers have a dramatic misunderstanding between styling of an H1 or a header tag and the HTML element of a H tag. A lot of times what you see is people will want a heading to be large, so they'll just decide that that heading is an H1 or an H2. In reality, when you are using these heading tags, you are actually telling Google what this page is about, and you are building out a hierarchy of your content. If you do this improperly, it can make a difference with how the page ranks, surely because you didn't want to use the additional work that it takes to use CSS or any other kind of styling approach, whether that's built-in graphic interfaces, etc. So you need to have a basic understanding of header tags. What is an H1? What is an H2? How do they need to be used? This should inform the body copy, the heading copy, all of this stuff. Body copy should be in paragraph tags. You should not have body copy in H3 tags, for example. You should not have 15 H1 tags because you want all of these things to be the same size. That's not how heading tags are supposed to be used. So doing these SEO basics almost immediately on a site will result in an improvement in ranking by fixing this basic on-page stuff. So we talked about a lot of different things. We're 32 minutes in now about common mistakes and things that you need to keep in mind when it comes to web design and development. Hopefully this gave you a handful of things that you want to do further research on and gain a better understanding on. But the majority of these issues that I do see are related to a handful of things around specifically misunderstanding how people consume websites, and then not putting yourself in the place of the person consuming the website. If you do those things, if you are willing to swap places with them and view the website that you're building under a microscope or a lens of, wanting to be able to use that website to its fullest extent and understanding what it's been done, what it's been created for, what's the intended purpose of each page, then it should help you and should guide you into what changes you do need to make. So hopefully this was helpful. If you want some more information on this, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on pretty much every social media at Andrew Lee Jenkins. Go ahead, leave a comment in the description if you've got a question, comment, concern, whatever, and I will chat with y'all later. Cheers.